In less than 2 months, Wisconsin voters will be heading to the polls in what some describe as the biggest election of our lifetimes. Wisconsin is a swing state. Our votes could determine the next president of the United States. What do Wisconsinites need to know so we're ready to vote in November? And are there changes from the 2022 midterms or the August primaries that impact voting? We have the expert here to help us. Debra Cronmiller is the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin. Welcome back to Connect MKE.
Thank you so much for having me.
November 5th is going to be here before we know it. Is there anything new that we need to know as we prepare to vote?
I think that it's always good to know where to find your resources. And the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin has produced and has just republished our Vote 411 guide. So that will give you information about candidates on your ballot for all the different races on the ballot. It will also provide you links to important information. Where's your polling place? What are the hours on your election day? What are the early voting hours, and where are those locations? So it's kind of a one-stop shop for all the important information that you will need to cast your ballots on where am I now? November the 5th. Yeah.
And where can people find that guide?
Just go on www.vote411.org.
Perfect. One thing that has changed since 2022 are the legislative districts. We have new legislative districts for our state assembly and our state senate. What kind of difference will that make to folks if they haven't voted since the midterms or even since the last presidential election in 2020?
Well, that's why it will be important that every voter knows where their polling place is. And that can be found at myvote.wi.gov or at the Vote 411 guide. But many polling places have changed as a result of the newly enacted maps that went into effect on February 19th of 2024. So all the different races, some races around the state, we have 2 incumbents who have now been redistricted into the same district. Some districts have no incumbent, so it's we just threw in August, we had to determine who was going to be on the primary, who would emerge into the general election ballot here in November. But there are lots of changes, and we had very few issues that voters experienced in August. So I think with good preparation, you can make your way to the right location and cast your ballot and not have any wasted time that day.
Absentee ballots are big in Wisconsin. People like to be able to have that flexibility. When should people start thinking about contacting their local municipalities regarding absentee ballots?
You can request an absentee ballot right now. In fact, the window we're in the sweet spot of the window for the November race right now. But when you go to request your absentee ballot, if you haven't already done so this year, you can always choose the option, if it's earlier in the year, to get all the ballots for that year sent to your home. So, and that's not everybody's aware of that feature, but it is allowed in law to request all the ballots for all the elections. And once you have your absentee ballot, the same goes true for if you're voting early or if you're voting at your polling place. You still need to have the knowledge about the candidates. What are their positions? What are their values? So you can best align your vote with the candidate that, is truly going to represent you and what you want for your community.
Drop-off ballot boxes are back, but not every municipality is opted to participate. Is that, again, a case where you really need to check in with the municipality and know what your options are to get that absentee ballot back?
Absolutely. Many of our major cities are opening up their drop boxes, but we have many smaller communities. In Brookfield, for instance, that city council decided, you know what, We're just not sure about drop boxes. It's a burden on the clerk to re-educate voters about how to use them because we did have a period of time there where we couldn't use them. So they opted not to use them. That's up to them. Though the Supreme Court decided that they can be used in Wisconsin, which overturned an earlier decision made by the previous Supreme Court that they couldn't be used in Wisconsin, but it is not a mandate. The Supreme Court did not say every municipality in Wisconsin must have a drop box available to its voters, but rather they may have drop boxes available. And again, My Vote or Vote 411 will let you know where drop boxes are located in your community. You do need to put an absentee ballot that into your own municipality's drop box. You can't drive to Milwaukee if you live in Madison and put it in a Milwaukee drop box. So it needs to go into a Madison drop box.
Early voting, that's something that we've enjoyed the opportunity to do in Wisconsin again. And it's pretty popular. Are municipalities able to expand those dates, or are we just kind of where we've been in the past, where we're just looking at a couple of weekends usually before the election?
Yeah. There is statute around how early voting can start, and it's 14 days in advance of the election. And so we do capture 2 weekends in there. But the hours that early voting happens is set by each clerk. So some clerks have early voting from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Some clerks have early voting only from noon until 5, and then at their location that they would designate. Those decisions, however, had to have already been made. You can't just sneak in extra early voting sites really close to that early voting period. They have to be declared, approved by the government bodies that make those decisions. And so there is time to notify voters where those early voting sites are and what the hours of those early voting sites will be.
We've seen, and we saw in a suburb here in the Milwaukee area during the August primary, where there was a little bit of trouble at one of the voting places with the observers that are allowed to be there. There have been calls for people to, in some cases, be very assertive or aggressive observers. Are Wisconsin's, our municipalities, clerks ready, or election commissions ready for any kind of mischief that might be occurring at some polling places?
Well, we hope they are. We've been putting out guidance, the league has been putting out guidance about kind of clarification of the observer laws that are in place in Wisconsin. And it is, an observer is an entitled participant to the process. And you do need to sign in with your election inspector the day of the election if you're observing on November 5th, or if you're going to observe at an early voting site, same process. You do have to provide your proof of ID. If you're there representing on behalf of a party, and the parties can send observers to all the early voting and the day of voting, you do have to declare that as well. Otherwise, you're just an interested citizen, and you can put that down as well. The League of Women Voters actually has a very robust observer corps. We train observers to understand what should happen in the voting process, and so we want to make sure that all the clerks have trained their poll workers well, and so we can document any abnormalities, and we can also document best practices and share those with other clerks after the election. So everybody's game just keeps improving election cycle after election cycle.
Debra, thank you so much for sharing this information with us. Lots of opportunities for people to be able to cast their ballot, so there shouldn't be an excuse not to vote.
That's correct. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're right back with a look at a new program that could make college more affordable for some Wisconsinites. Stay with us.